During our family vacation, my daughter-in-law bellowed at the hotel front desk. "Don't talk to the old woman. She's just help." My son laughed. She hadn't a clue I was the owner. What I did next put her in her place. "I'm glad you're reading this. Stay with me to the end of my story, and let me know what city you're reading from so I can gauge how far its reach extends." I had been looking forward to this break for months. Being 72 years old, opportunities to spend quality time with my son Jay and his family did not knock at the door too often. When he suggested a week in Miami, I was overwhelmed with hope. Maybe now I could finally approach Valentina, my daughter-in-law, who had been keeping her distance all along since those 5 years of marriage. The 4-hour journey to the coastal paradise resort was spent hearing Jay and Valentina talking about spa treatments, tea times, and expensive dinners, with me being completely ignored. When I tried to contribute, inquiring about the children or suggesting something we could do as a group, Valentina gave a curt reply, and Jay ignored me altogether. I should have been sensitive to the warning signs. But I so much wanted to mend our family relationship that I did not care. Coastal Paradise Resort was one of my best achievements, though my family never realized it. When my husband passed away when Jay was still 12 years old, I built my hotel empire from ground up. I started with one small bed and breakfast, 18-hour days, mopping floors and taking reservations. I built it up over time to 17 properties in 3 states. I kept my business separate from my family, not wanting Jay to love me for my money but for myself. Arriving at the grand entrance, a swelling of the well-known pride swelled in my breast on seeing the spotless gardens and the white-clad valet racing to greet visitors. It had taken me 3 years to buy Coastal Paradise and another 2 to restore it to its perfectness. Every aspect from the shining marble floors to the crystal chandeliers was my personal choice. Jay passed the keys over to the valet while Valentina adjusted her designer sunglasses, her blonde locks immaculately styled. She was certainly beautiful, a beauty that comes at a price paid in dear salons and personal trainers. At 35, 20 years younger than Jay, she made sure everyone didn't forget it. "Remember," she told him as we approached the doors, "I want the penthouse suite. Don't tell me what they say about availability. Just do it." Jay nodded easily. It still stunned and pained me the way he showed deference to her. The independent lad I had raised was now a man who could not even get on with anything without asking his wife. We stepped inside the opulent lobby, and I smiled at the familiar buzz of activity. Jasmine, the front desk manager, looked up, and her eyes widened as she took in my appearance, but I made a subtle headshake. I wasn't yet ready for them to discover who I actually was. "Good day," Jasmine welcomed warmly but professionally. "Welcome to the Coastal Paradise Resort. How can I help you?" "Reservation by Carter," replied Jay. "We are supposed to have the penthouse suite." Jasmine's fingers moved quickly across the keyboard as she checked. "Here is your reservation, Mr. Carter. That's reserved for us in our Coastal Paradise Deluxe Suite, but the penthouse is reserved for the length of your visit." I noticed Valentina's face set, her jaw tight and her eyes flashing with annoyance beneath her flawless makeup. "That is not acceptable," she snapped. "Do you know who we are?" "I requested the penthouse when I made this reservation." Jasmine winced, but her shoulders did stiffen slightly. "Sorry for the misunderstanding, Mrs. Carter. The suite deluxe is lovely, and the room does have a private balcony." "I don't want to hear about some lesser room," Valentina exclaimed loudly enough that other diners turned to glance at her. "I want the penthouse, and I want it immediately." I took a step forward, hoping to diffuse the tension. "Valentina, perhaps we could—" But I never got to finish my sentence. She spun around to face me, her face distorted in anger. "Don't you ever open your mouth," she screamed, her voice echoing off the marble floors. "Jasmine, or whatever your name is, just ignore whatever this old hag has to say. She's not important. She's just the help we brought along." The lobby conversation stopped. My face grew hot as the shame washed over me. But she had better. "Don't talk to the old lady," she screamed, pointing her finger at me like I was something dirty. "She's just the servant, the nanny. Spend no time on her." I was stiff, stuck in shock. My lips were dry, my heart pounding away so wildly that it felt like it was going to explode out of my chest. In 72 years, no one had ever spoken to me in such malice, with such utter disrespect, and never in public. What came next cut deeper than that. Jay threw his head back and laughed, not a nervous laugh to release the tension, but a laugh of real amusement, like watching his wife annihilate me in public was the funniest thing he'd ever seen. "Oh my goodness, Valentina," he laughed, wiping a tear from his eye. "You're terrible. But you're correct. Mom, just let us handle this, all right? Sit down somewhere." The betrayal hit me like a gut punch. This was my son that I raised on my own, whom I worked day and night for, whom I did everything for just to make sure he had a good life. And he was laughing at my humiliation. Jasmine's face went pale, a mixture of shock and pity which only made the pain more bitter. In the whole lobby, I heard gasps and people gesturing. Others were standing there with their phones, no doubt recording every second of this fiasco. "Ma'am," said Jasmine softly, her tone polite but still professional. "Perhaps you'd like to wait in our lounge whilst we sort out the room." Before I had a chance to answer, Valentina let out a huge dramatic sigh. "Yes, send the old bat somewhere where she won't humiliate us any longer, and get someone to babysit her. She gets lost easily." Jay laughed again. There were strangers loitering and staring, and I felt my heart break into 1,000 pieces. I wanted to disappear, run from this beautiful foyer, from my callous daughter-in-law, from my mocking son, and never come back. Something inside me, the last vestige of the vigor that had built this empire, restrained me. I caught Jasmine's eyes. Her eyes held a silent anguish. She recognized me perfectly. She understood that all it would take is one comment from me, and she could have Valentina eliminated so quickly she wouldn't even be able to get her designer heels up from the floor. But I said nothing. I picked up my small bag and went to the elevator. My shoulders set in spite of the crushing pressure of the shame I'd escaped. Behind me, Valentina continued to yell at Jasmine across the penthouse, her voice thick with the superior attitude of a woman who had never done a day's work in her life. When the doors shut on the elevator, I caught one final glance at Jasmine. She nodded ever so slightly, a silent communication that she knew she was sorry and that she was ready for the signal. I had built this empire from the ground up, with over 300 staff in my properties. I was a well-respected businesswoman, and other hotel owners approached me, envious of my honesty and fairness. But there, in that lobby, I was just a pitiful old woman being yelled at by her son's wife as my son laughed at my misery. As the elevator rose higher and higher to the 12th floor, each passing number stirred something within me. The pain was fresh and raw, but mixed with it, another feeling began to grow. Determination. The day I woke up in what should have been paradise but felt more like purgatory. My bedroom shared a view of the ocean with waves gently lapping onto the unmarred beach. The sun came up and painted the sky pink and gold, colors that are supposed to be breathtaking, but I didn't have anything. I felt drained, like someone had pulled the life out of me and left a husk. I hadn't slept. I could hear the smug voice of Valentina every time my eyes drifted closed. She's just the help. Jay's laughter resonated within me as I wondered whether I could have reacted differently, but deep within myself, I knew that the problem lay not with how I had responded. The reality is, my own family did not regard me as significant. A soft knock on the door interrupted my thoughts. I opened it to see Jay outside my room. He was scowling, but without any apology on his face. "Mom, we're off to breakfast. Valentina would appreciate you keeping the children near the pool later so we can have time at the spa." "No." "Good morning?" "No." "How did you sleep?" Not a nod in the direction of what had happened in the lobby. Just another command disguised as a favor. "Jay," I said softly. "Last night." He waved his hand in dismissal. "Mom, don't make such a big deal. Valentina was just stressed out about the room. You see how she gets when things do not turn out her way. A big deal? That is what he called his wife in public, humiliating me. She called me a servant, Jay. She yelled at me in front of strangers. He shifted position, not even daring to glance her way. She did not mean it. That's just Valentina being dramatic. Can we just act like it never happened? We're on vacation, remember? I looked over at him, searching for the boy I once knew. The little boy who would crawl into bed with me during thunderstorms. The one who would pick me dandelions and call them sunflowers. The one who once said I was the strongest person in the world. That boy was nowhere to be found. He had been replaced by a 47-year-old man who cared more about his wife's comfort than his mother's dignity. "Okay," I said, the word tasting of ash. "I'll babysit." His relief was plain. "Perfect. We most likely won't be home all day. Spa first, lunch, maybe some shopping. That's okay, right?" Of course, it wasn't okay. I had pictured this vacation as a time of family, a time to see my grandchildren and feel at home. What I was being asked to do was to be an unpaid nanny. But I complied. To refuse would be to make a scene, and I had long understood that keeping the peace was more important than having a voice. The dining room was packed with vacationers having meals. Valentina had managed to get a table by the window, the best spot in the house, and was already issuing directives to the waitstaff as if they worked for her. "I'll have orange juice, freshly squeezed, not that garbage that comes from a concentrate," she told our server, a young man named Terrell whom I remembered from past trips. "And make sure those eggs are cooked exactly 3 minutes, not a second more or a second less." I could see Terrell trying to remain calm, but the tension in his eyes gave him away. I had specifically told my staff to provide good service, but Valentina was testing even their patience to its limits. My 8- and 10-year-old grandkids, Zuri and Deshawn, sat silently at the table, their faces glued to their tablets. They did not even look up when I approached. "Good morning, baby," I said to Zuri, leaning forward to push a stray lock of hair out of the way behind her ear. But Valentina's hand moved out, catching mine. "Don't mess with her hair. It was just done yesterday and I don't want it ruined." I yanked my hand back as if I'd burned it on a hot burner. Zuri didn't even lift her gaze from her screen. "Good morning, Grandma Renee," Jay grunted, sounding disinterested. "Morning," they said in unison, still focused on their phones. I sat down in the only seat left, the one in back of the resort view. Valentina had set up the best seats for her family and left the rest for me, as if I were an afterthought. "Renee," Valentina said without looking my direction, "you'll take the kids to the pool after breakfast. Don't forget to put sunscreen on them an hour. Zuri's light-skinned and burns easily, and if she gets even a slight bit pink, I'm holding you responsible." I choked back an answer and nodded, and avoid the deep end. "And don't eat poolside treats. They're filled with preservatives. Oh, and if they need anything whatsoever, phone me immediately. Don't do it yourself." Each order was a tiny scratch. Another reminder that she didn't think I could handle my own grandbabies without her riding over me. "How long will you be at the spa?" I asked. Valentina finally looked at me, her eyes cold. "Long enough. This is our vacation, not yours." "You're here to help." Jay sat silently, phone in hand, completely checked out. I couldn't help but ask myself when he had become the kind of man that would let his wife order his mother around like a servant. After breakfast, I found myself at the pool with Zuri and Deshawn, trying to strike up conversation while they sat stuck in their phones. Around us, other couples laughed, joked, and really enjoyed each other's company. We were as different as two strangers who just happened to sit at the same table. "Grandma!" Zuri blurted out suddenly, and my heart leapt with the hope that she wanted to speak with me. "Mom says you used to earn money cleaning houses for wealthy people. Is that true?" The question stung like a slap in the face. I had worked my entire life. I had never cleaned a house for anyone. I'd started my own empire from scratch. I'd employed hundreds of people and gained respect in a man's world. And still, according to Valentina's twisted version of my life, I was merely a servant. "No, baby," I breathed. "I'm an entrepreneur. I build hotels." Deshawn finally glanced up from his tablet that morning. "Mom informs you that you make up tales about being significant because you feel ashamed of being poor." The cruelty of his words left me speechless. Valentina had not only humiliated me in public, she had also been poisoning my grandchildren against me, filling them with lies so they would look at me as a weak, crazy woman. "Your grandmother is not poor, and she does not tell lies," I stated, speaking firmly. Zuri merely shrugged. "That's what Mom says. She says you live in a little apartment and spend like you're rich to feel good about yourself. In actuality, I lived in a penthouse above the bay that was worth more than most people's total net worth. But my grandkids thought I was a poor, old lady living in the slums and bragging about my life. I sat by that pool for the next 6 hours staring at children, who barely looked my way as their parents got drunk at my expense. Every now and then, a different guest would make small talk with me, and I would respond with short courtesy remarks. Emptier and emptier by the minute. When Jay and Valentina finally arrived, they were radiating after spa treatments and an expensive lunch. Valentina's nails were freshly manicured, her hair perfect. She seemed to be the type of woman who had indulged herself for the day, and she had done so at one of the spas I owned with treatments I was actually paying for. "How were the children?" Jay asked without looking up at me. "They were fine," I replied. For what else could I have replied? That they thought me a servant and a liar? That their mother had gone to great lengths to destroy any hope of an actual relationship between us? "Good," said Valentina brusquely. "You can go see them tomorrow again. We have golf tomorrow morning and lunch with some friends we met at the spa." I sat and watched my son nod his head back and forth to her plans without even asking if I cared. Without so much as considering that maybe I wouldn't want to spend my holiday doing something other than free babysitting. That night, in my room, alone with my ocean view, I'd worked so hard to construct my own, I finally saw the truth. This wasn't a family holiday. It was a business trip, and I had been hired to fill the role of the servant. Except instead of getting paid, I was paying for the privilege of being treated like crap. But as I sat there in the dark, hearing the surf crash up on the beach, something shifted inside of me. The pain lingered, deeper than ever before. But with it now was something else. Pure, raw fury. Fury at being taken for granted, at the lies, at being treated like nothing when I had made everything. Things were going to change from tomorrow, I decided. Our third holiday day started much the same as the first two, with Valentina issuing orders for my schedule, and Jay parked in a chair beside her, bobbing his head as if a loyal aide. Today they were off on a day excursion to a local vineyard area, and I was being left to mind the brats. "Make sure they eat at noon on the dot," Valentina told me, carefully putting on lipstick as if performing delicate surgery. "And Zuri becomes cranky when her blood sugar level decreases, so keep the granola bars I packed handy." I'd attempted to remind her that I already had raised one child, that I knew how to take care of children, but I'd learned that asserting myself only gained me longer speeches and more subtle put-downs. "We'll probably be home at 6, Jay said without looking up from his phone. "Maybe later if traffic is horrible." As they were getting ready to leave, I could hear Valentina on the phone going on in that annoying, syrupy, sweet voice she used when she thought she was being too clever. "No dinner again tonight, though. The kids and I are trapped. I know it's ridiculous, but just for a little while longer. Trust me. Once all of this is done with, we will never have to do this again." I could feel a shiver run down my spine. The way that she had said "once all of this is done with" hadn't sounded like she was just talking about the holiday being done. After they left, I took the children to the children's club of the hotel, something that I had set up myself so that families could have more freedom in their holiday. The counselors were great with Zuri and Deshawn, and I saw them laugh and play with kids their age for the first time since we've been there. Getting a few hours alone, I walked around the property. It had been years since I'd ever really looked at my hotel as a guest and not an owner, and I wanted to see how things were truly going. That's when I heard the talk that turned everything around, the voice that I had trusted with every fiber of my being. "My mom? No chance, she's as broke as a church mouse. She lives in a tiny apartment on Social Security. I've been taking care of her for years." The deceptions flowed from his lips so smoothly. I wondered how long he'd been spewing them. I lived in a $5 million penthouse, bringing in more money every month from my investments than most people ever did in a year. But in Jay's tainted version of the story, I was his burden who graciously sponsored me. "That's why this holiday is so infuriating," Valentina continued. "We must escort her everywhere because she cannot cover anything herself. It's like possessing a miserable pet you can't get rid of." The other woman made a sympathetic noise. "How awful for you, and she believes you'll take care of her when she's actually old and sick." "Over my dead body," Valentina said with a wicked cackle. The second she needs any real care, she goes into a government home. I am not turning my house into a retirement home for some useless old woman. I clung to the palm tree to keep my feet. They weren't only talking about letting me die naturally. They were going to kill me the moment I became troublesome. But Jay's next words were the ones that crushed me. The ironic thing is that she still thinks she counts, he said, his voice filled with sadistic humor. She wanders around spouting these outlandish stories of operating companies and being successful. It's sad how delusional she actually is. Early onset dementia? The enigmatic man asked. Maybe, Jay answered. Or maybe she's simply desperate to believe that she matters. Either one, it's degrading. Yesterday, she even told the children that she owns hotels. Hotels, can you imagine? They laughed and the sound cut me like shards of glass. Well, Valentina said, at least we won't have to hear her silly stories much longer. I give her 5 years, 10 tops, and then we'll be free to live our lives without faking we care. A useless old woman who never did anything with her life. I stood there behind that palm tree, my entire world coming apart. This wasn't some offhand remark about a sad aunt. It was my own son and his wife plotting my demise with the same detachment, as if talking about a long-awaited vacation. The big finale, Valentina added, is that she's so grateful for any attention we give her, such as this holiday. She actually thinks we asked her because we wanted her to come along. She has no idea that we only brought her along so she'd mind the children and we could be off enjoying ourselves. More laughter, more flippant heartlessness. Does she even pay for things, Brenda? The other woman asked. Are you kidding me? Valentina laughed. She's completely useless when it comes to money. Jay pays for everything. Her groceries, her bills, even this vacation. She's a money burden on us. Another lie. I had been financially assisting Jay for years, paying half his mortgage, paying for his children's private school. I even paid for her shopping trips. The stratospheric credit card bills that landed on my doorstep were paid grudgingly by me, and I thought that I was supporting my household. The only good thing about her presence, Jay insisted, is that she's a good nanny. Free childcare, you see. She's so eager to oblige us. She'll do as we say. It's kind of ironic, actually. It really is, Valentina replied, seeing her go out of her way to make a good impression on us, showering the children with expensive gifts. She always, I recoiled, my hand snapping up to my mouth in shock at the sob. The lies were a breach of trust. But to hear them speak of my life as a joke, something to be discarded, cut deep. This had nothing to do with money or respect. This was a complete lack of humanity. They were not just taking my money. They were taking my dignity and my legacy and turning it into something nasty and worthless. My mind went back to that initial night in the lobby. I had been so embarrassed that I did not want to expose them. I had wanted to protect Jay from his wife's shame. But now I knew he was involved. He was the one who had put me on. He was an accomplice to my embarrassment. And he didn't mind. I had been so proud of all that I had accomplished, so proud of the life I had built for my family. But they had made a mockery of my hard work. I was nothing but an ATM, a unpaid babysitter, a wretched old crone they couldn't wait to abandon. A new anger was building up in me. It wasn't the impulsive rage of the night before. It was a cold, hard, unbreakable resolve. They thought I was useless. They thought I was a joke. They would find out what this useless old woman was capable of. I would make them understand what it was to disrespected me. I picked up my phone and dialed Jasmine's number. She picked up on the first ring. "Ma'am, I'm so glad you phoned," she answered, her voice a mix of relief and concern. "Is everything all right? Did you witness it?" "Everything is all right, Jasmine," I answered, my voice stern. "I need you to do something for me." I went back to the kids' club and rounded up Zuri and Deshawn. They barely looked away from their screens when I took their hands. "Come on, kids," I said. "We're going on an adventure." They looked up at me with sleep-deprived eyes. "Mom said we had to be here." Deshawn piped up and said, "Your mom is wrong." I said, "Come on." I took them down to the beach, and for the first time I left my phone and wallet behind. We built sandcastles. We ran along the water and I taught them how to find seashells. We laughed and I filled them in on stories of when their daddy was little. For a moment, it felt like a real family vacation, but knowledge of what we had ahead of us weighed heavy in my stomach. Jay and Valentina returned that evening, flushed with sun and liquor. They entered my room, ready to leave the children in my care and dine. But I stood at the doorway, blocking their way. "We are going out," Valentina said, not even looking in my direction, her eyes locked on the children. "You go to bed." "Oh, I am not going to bed yet," I answered, my voice as silky as a summer night. She just looked at me, a spark of annoyance in her eyes. "What is it?" "It is," I told her, "that you need to phone down to the front desk and book a new room for yourself for tonight. You're being checked out tomorrow morning." Jay and Valentina looked at me, their faces a tableau of confusion. "What are you talking about, Mom?" Jay asked. "Don't be stupid," I told her. "I overheard you talking at the cabana. I heard what you have been saying about me." Valentina's face changed from incredulous to downright angry. "You were eavesdropping on us," she growled. "You have no right." "I am the owner of this hotel, Valentina," I said, my words growing hotter with each passing sentence. "I have a perfect right to do whatever I choose. And what I choose is for you to leave." I pulled out a paper from my purse and handed it to Jay. It was an accounting of all the money I'd invested in him over the years. His eyes widened as he took in the numbers, finally understanding the extent of my benevolence. "You've been deceiving me?" he asked, his voice shaking as he looked at his wife. "She's the one lying?" Valentina screamed. "She doesn't own this place. She's nothing but a useless old lady who cleans houses for a living." Just then, Jasmine, the front desk manager, entered with security. "I was informed there was a commotion," she stated, addressing me, speaking calmly and professionally. "Jasmine, tell her!" Valentina yelled, pointing in my direction. "Tell her that she doesn't own the place." Jasmine looked at me, and I nodded to her quickly. "Mrs. Renee Carter is more than the owner of this hotel." Jasmine told me that she owns all 17 of the Coastal Paradise hotels in America on her own. She is our founder, our CEO, and the reason we are all here today. Valentina went white. She looked from Jasmine to me, her eyes blazing with desperation. Jay just stood there with his mouth hanging open, the paper clutched in his hand, evidence that he had not told the truth. "What does it mean?" Valentina at last managed to escape. "It means," I declared, my voice full of authority and resolve, "that you will be departing tomorrow morning, and you will be paying for yourself. All the funds you and your husband have paid for this holiday, every spa treatment, every meal, every cocktail, they will all be billed to your credit card." "You can't do this," Valentina yelled. "Oh, but I can," I replied, a slight smile playing on my lips. "And I will." I turned to Jay. "And as for you, my boy," I continued, "you no longer have my backing. The mortgage payments are cut off. The school fees are halted. You're on your own." Jay's face dropped. "Mom, please. We can discuss this." "There's nothing to discuss, Jay. I said you made your choice. You chose to laugh at your own mother's humiliation. You chose to lie about me to your children. You made your bed. Now you have to lie in it." He and Valentina glared at me, their faces curled with shock and betrayal. They believed they had me in their pockets, but they underestimated me. They did not realize that the old, worthless woman they mocked was the one who controlled the game. That night, better than in years, I slept well. I slept with the knowledge that I was respected and loved. And I woke up every morning expecting the day to be great. I took too long to understand that lonely and alone are not synonyms, and that sometimes the family you find is stronger than the family you have. Jay and Valentina thought they were teaching me something when they humiliated me in that hotel lobby. They were right about something. I did learn something that week. I learned that I am worth fighting for, even if it's just that I'm the one fighting. And it changed everything. The Below is a piece of fiction, but is a retelling based on some real events. Names and places have been changed to assist with keeping those involved anonymous. We're not sharing this to judge, but hoping that somebody will hear and take a moment to reflect. How many mothers are silently suffering in their own homes? I'm seriously asking. If you were me, what would you do? Would you remain quiet to keep the peace, or would you be courageous enough to weather it all to regain your voice? I would love to know what you think because every story is a candle that can illuminate another. God always blesses.